Good morning, Ambassador Paul Simons. It's a great pleasure to discuss with you nuclear energy issues in emerging economies. Dear friends, I'm Bekjan Alımkulov, a graduate student of SIPA, Columbia University. Ambassador Paul Simons served for a long time as a Deputy Executive Director at the International Energy Agency, as an ambassador at the U.S. Department of State, and as a Deputy Assistant Secretary for International Energy and Sanctions Policy. Ambassador holds degrees from Yale and New York universities. Ambassador, in this interview I would like to discuss mainly nuclear energy and particularly nuclear energy in developing countries. And the first question is, from your perspective, what is the future role of nuclear energy in net zero emissions by 2050?
Well, thank you very much, Beshan. And first of all, I'm really delighted to have you in my class this semester. It's terrific to have this perspective from Central Asia here. So thank you so much for all your contributions to our class. I think this interview is very important because if we take a look at the clean energy future, at the aspirations that many countries, 90% of countries' global emissions around the world committed to a net zero future today, we really need to think of how clean electricity and specifically nuclear energy, what role it can play. And I think it's important to note that even today, nuclear energy plays an extremely important role in the global electricity system. It contributes almost 20% of electricity in the advanced countries. And about 10% worldwide. And all of this electricity is zero carbon. So the trajectory of nuclear energy in the next 30 years, as we aspire to ramp down global emissions worldwide, will be extremely important. And the IEA, the International Energy Agency, where I worked for many years, has conducted a number of studies on nuclear energy and also on what a reasonable net zero pathway would look like. And from the perspective of the IEA, there are two major challenges. One is to make sure that the developed countries, which already have about 20% nuclear in their fleets, that they don't phase out nuclear too quickly. Because it's very difficult to replace nuclear with other zero carbon technologies. So a number of countries have committed to phase out or phase down nuclear energy on an accelerated path. And from the view of the International Energy Agency, it's a much better idea to extend the lifetimes of existing nuclear fleet, even if in those countries there is not political support for building new nuclear. So the IEA projections, if you go out to 2050, suggest that if you can extend these useful lives, because political support in the developed world is not too great for nuclear energy, it's still likely that nuclear energy will decline as a percentage of total electricity in the developed countries down to about 10% by 2050. However, in the developing world, the situation is more promising. And so the IEA is expecting total nuclear capacity generation in developing countries to go from about 5% of electricity today up to about 7%. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge increase, but don't forget that the developing countries are going to be responsible for 90% of the global energy growth in future years. So it's very important that the developing countries that are interested, willing, and that have public support for nuclear energy expand nuclear energy. Now, one of the wild cards here is the development of new technologies, specifically small modular reactor technologies. If these can take off in the next 20 years or so, then you could see the developed countries move larger into nuclear energy again. But it doesn't seem too likely that the developed countries are going to utilize today's technologies and build a lot of new nuclear. But the developing countries still have a long way to go and have shown more openness to work even with the existing technologies.
Definitely. That's almost impossible to reach carbon neutrality without nuclear energy. Ambassador, Kazakhstan, like many developing countries, generates electricity mainly from coal and natural gas. Currently, with increasing demand for electricity, our country needs to construct new power stations. We need more electricity generation. Keeping in mind that Kazakhstan is the world's leading uranium producer, should Kazakhstan build a nuclear power station?
Well, I think you raise a very good question. Kazakhstan is somewhat uniquely located and has unique endowments, especially with respect to uranium. Ultimately, the decision as to whether Kazakhstan should invest in nuclear power, I'm not going to make a recommendation there. That's a decision for the Kazakh people to take. I think it's important to conduct a study, an independent study of the various challenges and opportunities that are presented by developing nuclear power in a country like Kazakhstan. Take a close look at the costs, take a look at the regulatory regime that would be needed to be put into place, take a look at the skills that would needed to be developed in terms of human capital, take a look at the financing opportunities, and of course, somehow price into whatever financing arrangements the fact that this power will be zero carbon. In many places around the world, for example, renewable energy enjoys many supports, subsidies, tax benefits, guaranteed pricing, investment support, financial support. I think Kazakhstan, if it decides to go in this direction, should also think about providing the same type of support to nuclear power that it would give to other low carbon sources of energy. But ultimately, the decision needs to be the country's decision, and it needs to be taken in a way that all the stakeholders are comfortable with the decision. Because as you know, there are a number of countries around the world that have decided to phase down their nuclear power for reasons of safety. And these safety concerns are issues that the publics in these countries need to be comfortable with before launching a major decision to move ahead, for example, with, say, the first nuclear plant. So I think it's very important to have a stakeholder outreach process. And if the government decides this is something that they would like to do, present in a very careful way all of the safety protocols, the regulatory protocols, and the assurances that can give the public the sense that they will be comfortable having nuclear power as part of their electricity matrix.
And is it possible to build a whole nuclear cycle? I mean, mining, enrichment, consumption of uranium, and storage of used radioactive materials in one country?
Well, I think I don't have an immediate answer to that. I think probably additional study is needed to see exactly which portions of the cycle are feasible economically to be carried out in Kazakhstan, and which aspects could be imported. There are cost factors here. In particular, if Kazakhstan is starting with a very small nuclear fleet, you have to be attentive to a lot of the infrastructural costs and regulatory costs that are required to put into place a regime to manage a nuclear capacity. So I think it would be good for Kazakhstan to reach out to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, other groups that take a look at what you need to put into place a regimen that provides this type of assurance to the public that the safety considerations are managed properly.
Yeah, that will take lots of efforts and time. And the next question, in case of deciding to build a nuclear power station, what could be the biggest challenge for Kazakhstan?
I think there are several challenges. One is cost. So cost needs to be competitive, and the consumer cost needs to be manageable. So that's certainly one issue. The second is putting to place, that I mentioned before, the regulatory regime that is solid and that creates an effective regulator that's independent from the operator of the nuclear station. And then the most important, though, challenge, I think, I mentioned before, is public acceptance. The public needs to be convinced that nuclear power is an important element that will provide them energy security, that will provide them affordable energy, clean energy, and safe energy. And so that needs to be part of the process in terms of developing a structure with some type of stakeholder outreach so that the public is comfortable with this decision.
Thank you, Ambassador. On the one hand, today about 440 nuclear power reactors are operating in 32 countries with combined capacity about 390 gigawatts. These reactors provide about 10% of the world's, as you said, world's electricity. And on the other hand, one part of the population has a huge fear of deploying nuclear energy. And for that, they have a base as Fukushima, Chernobyl, and the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident in Pennsylvania. If we rely on the statistics, these cases are, just my opinion, are outliers. What do you think about the fears of people? Are they justified?
So I think that requires careful design of your program. But I don't think, again, I think it's very important to get the public on board for support. And the regulatory structure is extremely important. Regulation is really the key here. An independent, strong, independent regulator that is not connected in any commercial way to the operation of the plant is absolutely essential. So I think it would be good for Kazakhstan, to speak to the Japanese authorities about what they're doing now in terms of their regulatory system after Fukushima. Speak to the U.S. authorities, speak to other authorities around the world, France, other countries that have long experience with nuclear, to get a sense of what the best practices are for designing a regulatory scheme that will make the public comfortable with nuclear power.
Yeah, safety is one of the major concerns in deploying nuclear power station. And the next question is about energy independence and security. How that's important for a sovereign government to be an energy independent from others?
Well, typically, if you look at groups like the International Energy Agency or the World Economic Forum, other sort of international bodies that have kind of taken a look at this question of energy security, energy reliability, energy independence hasn't necessarily been the only criterion. And if you take countries like Japan and Korea, they are very heavily dependent on imports for most, if not all, of their fossil fuels. And yet they have built up quite strong energy security frameworks over the years by supply diversification, fuel diversification, energy efficiency, strong regulatory systems, market incentives. So certainly having domestic sources of some of the fuels can be valuable. And certainly if you have domestic sources available, there will be lots of reasons to exploit them. However, that is not the only way to arrive at energy security. You can have a broader range of policies that provide energy security through supply diversification, through energy efficiency, through good market design, good political relationships with your suppliers. So I think there are a mixture of elements that can contribute to energy security and energy reliability.
Construction of nuclear power plants takes a long time, from 5 to 10 years. And until the nuclear power station will be built, how countries could respond to their energy demand?
Right. Well, at any rate, if you're going to set up a nuclear regulatory regime in a country, that's going to take quite a few years, because you're going to have to train your people, you're going to have to develop programs in your universities. That it's going to be it's a long-term commitment. So so I think in any event, you're not going to be able to just snap fingers and get some kind of nuclear capability up and running. So I mean, in the meantime, you just have to do your planning. So there may be other options. It depends on how quickly your overall energy demand is increasing, and what's the situation with your existing assets. Obviously, having nuclear come in is very attractive from the standpoint of having, a major power source that is zero carbon. Down the road, that's something very attractive to have on the way. Now, as far as how you manage the interim, you would have to manage the interim, in any event. I mean, there are various things, it depends on the country, what your resources are, what your other options are. You can import power, you can build gas-fired plants, you can work on other renewables that can be built quicker because they'll probably still be needed. So I think, again, it depends on the country and on the planning process.
Thank you, Ambassador. This is the last question, and then this question is not about nuclear energy, but one of the most debatable, controversial issues of the modern world. What do you think? Should governments regulate the usage of electricity by cryptocurrency miners? I'm not saying about the financial side, but about the consuming of electricity, particularly fossil fuel-based electricity.
If you do get to the situation, or if you're arriving at a situation in which these cryptocurrency enterprises are moving towards some kind of macro impact on energy demand in a given country, where they actually affect the country's demand curve in some significant way, then I think definitely I think the regulatory agencies, the government, the utilities need to take a close look, do some analysis to take a close look at what the impact that has on carbon emissions, electricity demand. But I think again it depends. If you're well below that threshold, I'm not sure that you need to take action. But if things are starting to increase, then yes, I think some additional concern is wise.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your time, for your support of our initiative. This interview was very useful. I think our viewers found answers to many questions, and you gave some food for thought. Thank you.